My name is Lawan. I'm 73 years old. And I want to begin tonight with an image that came to me many years ago and has stayed with me ever since. An image that changed how I understood what I had been doing for most of my adult life. Imagine a person who is drowning, and imagine that what is drowning her is not the water. It is something she is holding in her hands. Something she picked up a long time ago and decided was too important to set down. Something that has kept her hands from being free to swim. And the tragedy is not that she cannot swim. She could. The tragedy is that she does not realize what she is holding. She has been holding it so long that it feels like part of her hand. She can no longer distinguish between the holding and the self, and so she drowns. Not from any external force, from her own grip on something she could, at any moment, choose to release. This is the image that came to me when I finally understood what letting go means, and what it meant in my own life, and what it has always meant for every person I have known who has discovered it. Not the dramatic releasing of some obvious burden. The quiet, gradual, sometimes surprising discovery of what has been in your hands all along. What you have been holding without knowing you were holding it. What has been costing you everything while feeling like it was saving you. Let me tell you what I was holding, because the specific things will differ for everyone, but the structure of the holding is almost always the same. I was holding a version of the past that I refused to release. Not the past itself, which cannot be held or released because it is simply gone. My relationship to the past, my insistence that certain things that had happened should not have happened, that certain words spoken should not have been spoken, that certain choices made by me and by others should have been different. And underneath that insistence was the belief that if I held on tightly enough to my position on what should have been, if I maintained the argument with reality firmly enough, something would eventually change. The past would revise itself. Someone would finally understand the full weight of what they had done. Justice would arrive in some form that matched the size of the wrong. And until then, I would hold. I would maintain my grip. I would keep the case open. And I would call this justice. I would call this self-respect. I would call it anything except what it actually was, which was suffering. My own suffering, freely chosen, renewed every day over something that was already over. What I did not understand then, and what I want to offer you tonight, is this. Letting go is not giving up. It is not saying that what happened was acceptable. It is not forgiving in the sense of excusing. It is not pretending. It is not defeat. Letting go is the recognition that your continued holding is the only active ingredient in your current suffering. That the thing you are holding has already happened, already been what it was, already left its mark, and that your relationship to it, your insistence that it be different than it was, is not changing anything about what happened. It is only changing your experience of right now. It is only costing you today. It is only preventing the peace that is available in this present moment from being received, because your hands are full, because you are gripping something that is already in the past with both hands. And with your hands full, you cannot receive what the present is offering. The Buddhist understanding of letting go begins with a teaching that seems simple and is actually one of the most difficult to genuinely receive. Everything that arises passes, not as consolation, not as the comfort of believing that bad things will get better, as an observation about the nature of reality itself. Every experience, every emotion, every circumstance, every state of being arises, exists for a time, and then passes. This is the nature of all phenomena without exception. And the suffering we experience is almost never caused by the arising and passing itself. It is caused by our relationship to it, by our insistence that what we want to hold should not pass, and that what we want to release should not have arisen. The suffering is in the fighting against the fundamental nature of things, and letting go is the cessation of that fighting. Not the cessation of caring, the cessation of fighting against the way things actually are. If something in what I'm describing is touching something you have been carrying, something you perhaps have not fully named, stay with me. Because the practice of letting go is not an idea. It is something you do, something that can be learned, something that changes with practice from effort to naturalness, from loss to relief. And if this space is giving you something real tonight, come back, because what I'm sharing is not for one listening. It is for returning to when the grip tightens again, as it will, and you need reminding of what you already know. The first thing I had to learn about letting go is that it is not a single act. It is a practice. Most people who try to let go fail, not because they lack the willingness, but because they expect it to be complete. They expect to let go once and be done, to feel the relief and never have to return to it. But the mind does not work this way. The patterns of holding are old. They are grooved deep into how we relate to ourselves and to our histories, and they return again and again. Not because you have failed the practice, because the practice is the returning, not the arriving and staying, the returning. Every time you notice the grip tightening again, every time the same argument with the same past event begins again, the practice is to notice it and to choose again to release. Not with frustration about having to release it again, with the same gentleness you would bring to a child who keeps forgetting the same lesson, again and again, until the groove deepens in the direction of release rather than in the direction of holding, until the default begins to shift, until letting go becomes more natural than holding. The second thing I had to understand is the difference between letting go and letting be. Letting go does not mean that the thing you are releasing disappears from your awareness. It does not mean you stop feeling the grief or the anger or the sense of injustice that was associated with it. It means you stop fighting its existence. You let it be what it is. You let the grief be grief, without insisting it should be over by now. You let the anger be anger, without demanding it transform immediately into something more acceptable. You let the loss be loss, without requiring it to become a lesson or a gift or a reason before it is allowed to exist. Letting be is actually prior to letting go. Before you can release something, you have to allow it to be what it is. Because you cannot release what you are still fighting against. You can only release what you have first allowed to be. The third practice is what I call the body-based release. Because letting go is not primarily a mental act, it is a physical one. Holding is something you do with your body. The tension in your chest when you think about a particular person or event. The tightening in your shoulders when a certain memory arises. The constriction in your throat when you try to speak about something that still has power over you. These are not metaphors. They are real physical patterns in your body, and releasing them requires working at the level of the body, not just the level of thought. The practice is this. When you notice you are holding, bring your attention to where the holding lives in your body. Find it physically. Feel it directly. And then, with your exhale, allow it to soften slightly. Not to disappear, to soften. Just on this exhale, you are not releasing the whole thing in one breath. You are releasing the fraction that this breath can carry. And you are practicing the direction of release rather than the direction of holding. This practice, done consistently over time, over many breaths and many days, produces a quality of physical openness that no amount of mental decision-making can produce. Because the body has its own timeline, its own process of releasing. And when you work with it, rather than demanding that it comply with your mental schedule, it eventually does what it was always designed to do. It lets go. The fourth dimension of letting go is the practice of releasing expectations. Not all expectations. The specific category of expectation that is the most persistent source of suffering that I know. The expectation that the people in your life will be different than they are. That they will change. That they will become who you need them to be. That they will finally understand. That they will offer what they have never offered. That they will show up in the way you have always hoped they would show up. These expectations are not wrong to have had. They arise from genuine love and genuine need. But when they become requirements, when the peace and the connection and the love you have available becomes conditional on their fulfillment, they are the source of enormous ongoing suffering. Because people by and large are who they are. Not all the time. People do change, but not on your schedule. Not in response to your need. Not in the way you have decided they must change before you can be at peace. And releasing the expectation, truly releasing it, not pretending to release it while secretly maintaining it, is one of the most profound acts of letting go there is. The fifth practice is letting go of who you believed you were supposed to become. This is the most subtle and perhaps the most important form of letting go that I know. Most of us carry an image of who we should have been by now, what we should have achieved, where we should have arrived, what qualities we should have developed, what wounds we should have healed, what version of ourselves we should have become by this particular age. And every day that we fall short of this imagined version, which is every day, we experience a quiet but real form of suffering. The suffering of being behind, of having failed to become what we should have become, of being less than the person we believed we were becoming when we were young and hope was simpler. Letting go of this imagined self is not giving up on growth. It is releasing the particular story about what growth looks like and by when. It is allowing yourself to be who you actually are, at this actual age, with this actual history, and these actual gifts, and these actual limitations. And meeting that person with the same quality of compassionate acceptance you would bring to anyone who had lived what you have lived. Not accepting permanent stagnation, accepting the real you that is here right now as the starting point, the only possible starting point. And discovering that from this real starting point, from the actual person you are, rather than the imagined person you should have been, real growth is more possible than it has ever been. Because it is not burdened by the weight of what you were supposed to have done by now. My name is Lawan. I'm 73 years old. I live in a small temple where the practice of letting go is the texture of every day. Not because we have mastered it, because we know it is the work, because we return to it every time we notice the grip has tightened again, which it always does, and we are not surprised by the returning and not defeated by it. We simply practice again. The exhale, the softening, the choosing once more of release over holding, of presence over the past, of the peace that is available right now over the argument with what should have been. That peace is real. I have lived in it enough to know it is real, not the absence of difficulty, the presence of spaciousness, the quality of a hand that has opened, that can feel what it is touching, that can receive what is offered, that is no longer drowning from what it refuses to set down. Before we part tonight, I want to ask you one question. What have you been holding so long that it has started to feel like part of your hand? Not the easiest thing to name, the truest one. Because naming it is often the first breath in the direction of release. And that first breath is all the practice ever asks of you. Just the next breath. In the direction of open rather than closed, of release rather than holding, of peace rather than the grip. Tell me in the comments if you want to, or simply sit with the question and let what wants to surface, surface. That too is a form of letting go.